Gabe Newell, the legend of the gaming industry, today will share his history, his insights in 2025. He will give advices to the young generation, and we will speak about his history and legacy on the Steam, the Half-Life, and the games like Counter-Strike and Dota 2. The Gabe Newell is a legend, and we will talk to him for the first time since 22 is first interview. Thank you for watching. You will find the useful insights from this interview, and I wish you the best. Thank you. Follow and subscribe. Thank you. It's an honor to meeting you, Mr. Gabe. The first question I wanted to start is that why did you choose a computer engineer, and what was your journey on it?
I started programming in high school. At the time, programming wasn't really a career path. There were probably only a couple of thousand programmers in the United States, and they all worked on mainframe accounting software primarily. And maybe there were some people doing stuff at NASA. But it wasn't like people said, oh, there's this huge industry where software gets developed. And video games didn't even exist. I was 10 before the first video game came out. It was called Pong. So when I was a kid, I thought I was going to be a doctor. And programming was what I did when I should have been doing something else. Right? It wasn't a career path. There were no classes in it. And like my first programmable device was a calculator, a TI calculator. Through the high school that I was at, we were able to go to the University of California at Davis and access the mini computer they had there. So we would do what was called batch programming, where you create a punch card and then run the punch card through the punch card reader and then run over to the line printer and see what your output was. So the very first sort of real video game I played was a game called Trek, which print out the Enterprise as an E and the Romulans as an R and the Klingons as a K and the star was an asterisk. And you use the same random number seed at the beginning of each of your batch jobs so you can just do the next move. So our frames per second at that point were more like minutes per frame, and it usually takes about 15 minutes to do a move. So, once again, this was just a complete distraction and waste of time versus what I was supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. I went to Harvard and started taking, continuing to take programming courses. Once again, it didn't occur to me that programming was a career path. I went out to visit my brother for Thanksgiving, and he just started a job at Microsoft, and he was at the time, Microsoft wasn't the largest software developer in the world. It wasn't even the largest software developer in the US. It wasn't the largest software developer in Washington State. It was the third largest software developer in the suburbs of Washington at the time, right? So there was no notion of it having any sort of, any of the reputation that it would have, say 10 years later. So I was visiting my brother, and I thought he and I were going to just hang out, but he was working on a C compiler, and so that's what he did all his time. So I just hung out with him at work, and Steve Ballmer got mad because I was distracting Dan from doing his job and said, if you're going to be hanging out here, why don't you do something useful? So I said, fine, I'll do a little work, and decided I'd take the quarter off and just work at Microsoft. But I kept saying, but I have to go back and finish my degree. And 13 years later, I still hadn't gone back and finished my degree. Mm-hmm. So that's where I learned the profession of being a developer. And it was interesting how much faster I was learning by working at Microsoft. Right, it was at the time it was the best place in the world to learn how to be a programmer. Mm-hmm. It was a company that really prided itself on its ability to produce code faster and with higher quality and to solve programming problems that nobody else was solving. And had lots of great people to learn from. And that's what, it was pretty obvious when I got there that in terms of doing interesting work that was going to be valuable to, at the time, hundreds of thousands of people doing it at Microsoft was way better than going back and continuing my education at university. I was there for 13 years and then decided to start Valve. And Valve obviously makes video games, makes Steam, and makes hardware devices. I've also been involved in starting an educational research company called Foundry 10, a neuroscience research company called Starfish, and a marine research organization called Inkfish.
After joining Microsoft and the moment when you understand that the gaming industry is developing fast, and how was your decision to creating the games and to starting this team?
When I was working on Windows, people would always explain to us why you didn't need graphical user interfaces and you didn't need standard methods of accelerating graphics accelerators. So everybody would, create their own sort of interface to the hardware, and they were all over the place, right? Some of them were, could only take advantage of a narrow set of aspects in the hardware. Some of them were just unbelievably slow, and so on. And we were trying to explain to them why device-independent graphics was a useful way of improving their applications. But everybody kept explaining to us that couldn't possibly be the right solution, right? That everybody needed to develop their own method of taking advantage of graphics accelerators, right? So the people who were most resistant to it was the PC games category. And so we'd look at it and say, okay, well, maybe that's true. And then we'd look at it and we'd see how they were actually using the device. And it would be obvious that they were completely underutilizing the capabilities of the devices, that they had one person working on it, and they weren't necessarily very good. But they were sort of under the illusion that they were going to lose a bunch of performance or capabilities by moving to Windows. So I decided there were two things that I was doing. One, there was this whole phenomenon where id was out distributing Microsoft, with Doom, right? That they had a completely alternate model of how to reach customers and engage with customers that I thought was super interesting, to the point that there were more people using Doom than were using Windows when there was a big survey done. And it was also considered to be the most graphically advanced game. Like it was, you couldn't see anything like Doom that would run on the consoles or run in arcades. And so I contacted the people at id and said, hey, we'll port Doom onto Windows and just give it back to you. And by taking what was considered to be the most demanding video game of the time and getting it running under Windows, rather than having these debates, we could just show people, look, here's Doom, it's, you know what it is, and here it is running under Windows. And so, it's a proof that you can have very high performance running video games on Windows. And that's when I got to know the guys at id. So that combination of seeing how id was sort of presented a bunch of evidence that maybe the way of thinking about how to have customer relationships in the age of interconnectivity was wrong. That it was the way that Microsoft thinks about these things in terms of distribution and Salesforce and resellers and all of that was missing the opportunity represented by the advent of networking. And getting to know and thinking about the kind of company you would design as a result of that change in the relative value of different line of business functions. Like sales is worth a lot less relative to product development. So it used to be like in the 1920s, your products didn't really matter. It was all about your ability to distribute those products. And then maybe in the 1950s it was like this, but in the 1990s it was going to be like this. And that if that's true, then you want to redesign your businesses to take advantage of that relative transition. So I enjoy playing video games and use that as an excuse to say, oh, I can go design a video game company, and have very strong opinions about what the opportunities were to build more interesting video games. And Half-Life was sort of an expression of those concepts. It's like, this is, I was willing to sort of put my money where my mouth was on the design of the game and on the design of the company. And that's when we started Valve. And that's where the ideas for Half-Life came from, is really in a response to looking at the opportunities to build what I thought were going to be a better approach to game design. And if I was wrong, I'd have to go back to Microsoft.
In 2025, Mr. Gibbs, the people who are in their 20s, internationals, who wants to achieve success in their life, what can you recommend for them? What kind of advice you can give them?
Well, I think at various points there have been significant technology transitions. There was pre-computer and then there was post-computer. There was pre-internet and there was post-internet. I think it's incredibly obvious that machine learning systems, AI systems, are going to profoundly impact pretty much every single business. So if I had to point to a technology transition to get in front of, it's to figure out how to use AI to do anything better. If you want to be an accountant, learn AI. If you're going to be an attorney, learn AI. If you're going to be a programmer, make sure that you know how to use the tools and are comfortable with those programming concepts. And that all seems super obvious. There are a lot of people who were incredibly successful simply because they were the first person in finance at their company to learn how to use Lotus 1, 2, 3, right? Everybody else was still doing accounting in traditional ways, and all this, you would look like a super genius just because you knew how to use a desktop computer and a spreadsheet, right? Similarly, around the internet, there were the companies and individuals who saw the opportunity and took advantage of those opportunities to create more value, either as an individual or as a corporation, and they zoomed ahead of everybody else. So essentially, AI is going to be a cheat code for people who want to take advantage of it. And then put yourself into a situation where you can iterate in the context of feedback from a user base. And they'll teach you how to get better at what you do much faster than almost any other mechanism that I'm familiar with. So build something, whether it's a game or a website or a piece of software or some service, and iterate on it where you try to perturb the system in a way where you make a predictive statement about how that system will perturb, how the customer's behaviors will change, and then go find out if you were right, and then use that updated information to improve your model of how you create value for those customers and go from there. So if you could do that while capitalizing on the new capabilities that AI gives you, then I think you're off to the races and you're very, very well situated. There's going to be a gigantic shortage of people across all industries who can understand how to take advantage of it. And I'm serious. Everything is going to be impacted. If you're on a boat and you're a captain, if you can figure out how to get your bridge systems to take advantage of machine learning, it's going to make you 10 times as valuable as captains who don't understand that. Or if you're a bridge system developer, if you're Kongsberg and you have closed proprietary systems, I'm not saying you do, but if you do, then you're going to get crushed by somebody being able to do stuff on their iPhone that your multi-million-dollar bridge system can't do simply because it doesn't have an easy way to take advantage of the capabilities in the open systems. That make sense?
Yeah. As a multi-billionaire, the person who achieved the high success in their life, who is a legend in the gaming industry, what kind of advice you can say like that separates people who achieve and don't succeed?
There's no one size fits all thing. Like each person has to kind of figure that out for their own. Like it's an inconvenient truth that there are no simple slogans. There's no simple things that you can do. Everything that is a good idea and for one person at a certain point in time is a terrible idea for somebody else. So, I mean, the tactics I would suggest are make sure that you have people around you that you can trust, that you can have transparent communications with, and just engage with them to sort of think about how you can get better. But it's never like follow your passion. Well, you know, sounds like a great idea, but lots of people follow their passions right, you know, into a crater. You know, and then there's a selection bias or a survival bias where the people who are successful then go back and say it's because I wear a yellow shirt. Everybody should wear a yellow shirt, and it's correlation, it's not causation and stuff like that. So my advice to people is, I mean, the tactic I would strongly suggest is think about the people that you work with and collaborate with, and make sure they're the best people you can find because they'll help pull you through whatever developmental challenges that you might have. And each person's challenges are going to be different. Some people have motivational challenges, some people have training, have knowledge gaps, some people have, they haven't found which field they really, are going to contribute the most in. And so the advice for each one of those people is going to be different and contingent on sort of where you're coming from. So I tend to view it as there's never a size fits all kind of approach to having that, achieving those kinds of things. It's going to be idiosyncratic, independent. And the key is to have the people around you who will help you make that progress. It's just a lot easier when, you have somebody who can slap you upside the head and say, you're being stupid, stop it, right? Or, you really need to take a risk here, or things like that, who are giving you good advice. But that's really tactical, right? There are lots of examples of people who haven't had that sort of social graph around them to help them, but it certainly makes it easier. So it simplifies the challenge. It doesn't define the challenge that people are going to be facing.
Mr. Gabe, I am an international student from Kyrgyzstan. The countries like Central Asia, like post-Soviet countries, who speak the Russian language. We have Turkish heritage, and I was from the CIS community. I wanted to ask you, for the Russian audience, what can you say to them?
I'm not, I don't really think I have something specific to say to the Russian audience. It's not really that different from anybody else. We've got lots of Russian partners that we love working with. I've always wanted to go to Tuva. I don't know if Tuva counts as CIS.
TUVA. Yes.
I've always wanted to go to Tuva. I haven't been to Russia yet. I'd love to go. I think the advice that I would give to somebody from the CIS regions is, no different than the advice I'd give to everybody else. Figure out how you can create value for other people. Make sure you've got great people around you. Work hard. It's super boring advice. All the CIS players that I know from Counter-Strike and Dota 2, love hanging out with them. So.
People doesn't have access to the Bay Areas and big tech corporations, but they wanna learn a lot and study, but they don't have access to the big companies, big universities. What can you say to them who wants to maybe come to the US, or they don't need to, they can do it in their own countries? How is the impact in regions if there is a situation?
So I think that there used to be a lot of value to certain kinds of geographic co-location. I think that value has gone down enormously for both technical reasons and by everybody sort of having to retrain. So, I live on a boat nowadays, right? I haven't been back to Bellevue in a couple of years. Mm-hmm. And I'm perfectly capable of working and engaging with a lot of people on a wide range of projects. And I think that's, the key thing, I think, whether you're in the CIS region or, in Silicon Valley or wherever, is really to figure out, I would say find your team. Don't assume that your team is somehow located in Silicon Valley or that you have to go to the Bay Area in order to get something done. Focus on delivering value to people right now rather than viewing your geographic location as some fundamental impediment, right? Mm-hmm. Like I said, I'm not located with everybody else at Valve right now, and I don't think about that as the biggest. There are many problems that I have, and where I'm physically located is pretty low on the list of things, right? I'm spending all my time trying to think through the implications of machine learning on video game design and video game services. I'm not thinking about, this would be easier if I was in a physically different location. So. Mm-hmm. The opportunities are there regardless of where you are in the world. 30 years ago, it was much more of a problem. Even 5 years ago, it was more of a problem. But and some of the problems that you would have before the COVID pandemic kicked off were that a lot of people weren't used to working with people remotely. But that sort of forced everybody to retrain around remote work. And so even those kind of the hysteresis around that kind of organizational transition is gone. But there are lots of teams that are working with people in a highly distributed fashion. One person's from Brazil, one person's from Greece, one person's from Korea, and they're perfectly capable of creating value. The much harder problem is figuring what it is that you're going to work on that is useful for people. And just dig in, make a tool for the other students around you, and then go and iterate on it for 5 or 6 generations to see what your users are going to teach you. That's way more interesting way to frame the challenge, I think, than trying to figure out which geographic location you need to be in.
Mm-hmm. In 2025, you recommend people highly use AI. And I wanted to ask, we need to learn technical side, or we need to learn how to use AI, the tools which we have right now, and using it on maximum level.
I think it's both. I think the more you understand what underlies these current tools, the more effective you are at taking advantage of them. But I think we'll be in this funny situation where people who don't know how to program, who use AI to scaffold their programming abilities, will become more effective developers of value than people who've been programming, for a decade, right? So even if you're just a pure tool user, you're going to find that the gains to utilizing those tools are very, very high. But I think your ability to use those tools will continue to improve the more you understand the underlying methods and mindsets of people developing machine learning systems. So I think it's both, and I think they're highly complementary. And if you're a filmmaker and you don't understand how to use AI, you're really going to struggle in the not too distant future. But if you're an AI tool user, you're going to be even better if you think to yourself, I could spin up a simple model to solve a very narrow problem that I have, and I understand its strengths and limitations and why I can get away with not using a foundation model to solve a technical problem, because I understand the domain broadness of the domain and the utility of the narrow model. Like, those are going to be super useful, and then you'll be kind of off to the races. I mean, I think it'll be like I'm going to pick filmmaking because I think it's going to be like 10 times as significant as the impact of CGI was on filmmaking, right? In terms of the value of being accomplished with those technologies and how it would affect your career trajectory in the filmmaking industry. I think multiply that by an order of magnitude. I'm just picking a random industry in filmmaking. And similarly, if you're a tool user, it will help you understand the capabilities when a lot of other people will be, reading articles on Variety to try to understand what its impact is going to be on the industry, whereas some 19-year-old kid in his or her bedroom are going to be like, oh, you guys really don't understand this. I actually use this tool, and unless you're a regular user of it and have seen how it's evolving and have a sense of how it's going, you're going to completely miss the opportunities of how to take advantage of it. And that same person in their bedroom, the more they try to write a little bit of code or try to dig into the research papers on the topic, the more they're going to find that it's just going to accelerate that process even further.
Yeah, I wanted to start from the business perspective, Mr. Gibbs. The people who are studying business degrees, do you want to open businesses or create something useful for people? What kind of advices you can give them before starting businesses or going into the business field or finishing business degrees?
So people don't buy businesses, right? They buy value that you create for them, right? And you shouldn't ever think of yourself as I'm going into a business. You should think this is the value that I'm going to create for customers. And, that's the thing that you need to be really focused on is how you can, what is the value that you're creating for customers? Why is the value you're creating for those customers different than the value that other people are offering them, and how you can increase the value of that? So focusing on your customers and how to be valuable to them to the exclusion of almost everything else is a really good approach, right? Mm-hmm. I see a lot of people go into situations thinking that what they need is a pitch document to VCs to raise capital, and that's a deeply distracted beginning to an organization. If you're creating value for people, the capital will come your way, and probably at a reduced cost than it would be otherwise. Having a big bunch of capital and then saying, oh, I guess all those lies we told in our pitch deck, now we have to go and hire a whole bunch of people to be on this trajectory. I think that's a great way of destroying a bunch of money and wasting a bunch of people's time. So I think the key is to ignore all of the distractions around it and just focus on how do we make our customers happier, right? If you listen to your customers and focus on them, it's ridiculously easier to build a business. But the focus should always be on your customers and on your partners and on your employees, and then everything else will fall into place over time. Mm-hmm. Almost all discussions about branding that I ever hear nowadays are like, oh my God, you are so deeply distracted and confused about what you're trying to do here. All these discussions, most of what goes on in the business press targeting small companies is the exact opposite of what people, it changes, the spotlight is in the wrong place. Mm-hmm. It's like, who are your customers? What do they care about? Why would they care about this more than this? Those are the questions that people should be asking themselves. Until that you can sort of read your customers' minds and are continuously willing to be surprised by your customers, all the other stuff is really a distraction.
What is the difference between billionaires and just regular people?
In my case, it was luck, and it was being surrounded by really great people. Right, I'm not going to speak broadly. I haven't ever bothered to study the subject of billionaires and so on. Whenever I read anything about it, any of the analysis is really unsound. Like they ignore, this taking a group of people, there's this thing called survivor bias, where if you study the people who are in a certain category, you don't realize that, just because they share a characteristic, there was no causality to it at all. Mm-hmm. So in my case, I was very lucky, and then in multiple dimensions, and I've had the good fortune to, in the beginning of my career, to work with people like Neil Conson and Doug Clunder and Jeff Harbers, and then, starting companies with people like Jan and Jay and Scott, and, continuing to, be lucky enough to be around people like them, and having the roll of the dice continue to go in my way. I think that's how I've ended up where I am. I mean, it'd be great to say I'm just this absolutely fucking wonderful person, and that, I earned all of this and was, that this expresses my awesomeness, but there was an awful lot of luck that went into it.
What is the daily routine of Mr. Gabe's?
My daily routine, I get up, I work, I go scuba diving, work some more. If I either go on a second scuba dive or I go to the gym and work out. Then I live on a boat, so I just hang out with everybody on the boat. Then I work. I work 7 days a week. I'm working from my bedroom, as you can tell. I like working. It's fun. To me, it doesn't feel like work. It's like, the kinds of things that I get to do every day are super awesome. I've said it before, but when you retire, you want to stop doing your horrible job and then go do what is sort of most fun and entertaining. And so, I've been retired in that sense, I've been retired for a long time, right? Mm-hmm. I'm getting to work with Drew and Jeremy on AI stuff, or Chris on Steam stuff, or, we're building, in one of the companies, we're working on an aerosol pathogen detection device, so you can see all the pathogens that are in the air. Brain-computer interfaces are incredibly cool, and all of the associated neuroscience is incredibly cool. So I just work all the time. But, it's not like, oh my God, I'm up late at night, slaving away on stuff. It's more like I can't go to sleep because I'm having fun, reading emails and writing up my thoughts, or, doing, participating in, whatever it is that Casey wants me to be working on for whatever she's doing. So I have a pretty boring life. I scuba dive and I work, and that's pretty darn cool. I love working. But like I said, it doesn't feel like work most of the time.
What can you say?
For me, it feels like playing a multiplayer game with people I really like, right? It's like, gosh darn, I have to play Counter-Strike some more. Okay. But I'm talking about the work part of it. I'm just using the metaphor that it's not like I'm sitting there, I worked construction for a while, I delivered telegrams for a while, and that sucked, right? That was work. At the end of the day, you're waiting until the day is over so you can go have fun. Whereas, being part of Valve, or, we're working on a next generation full ocean depth submersible. Technically it's work, but it doesn't feel like work.
People in 2025 spending their time on scrolling Instagrams, TikTok, watching a lot of YouTube videos, and just getting distracted, spending time 5 hours a day, 10 hours a day, and they're not working, they're getting lazy, they don't want to work a lot, and just avoiding this working routine. What kind of advice, or what is can be issue on this, or how to avoid getting distracted on social media?
Well, I don't know. It depends upon why people are using. Like, I'm not a heavy user of social media at all. Like, to me, it's an obvious. It's a terrible game, right? It's like, oh, I'm supposed to be outraged or shocked or mad or stuff like that. And it's like, okay, well, that was fun for about a week, but now I'm kind of done with it. So social media doesn't really tickle any parts of my brain to make me want to do it. So I think the key thing is just find things you like doing more than social media, right? If you like watching anime, then why not try to figure out how to build an anime, right? If you like social media, then try to go and figure out how to build a social media system for you and your friends and people at your college, right? So look for the thing that is even more attractive to you than social media. In other words, sort of engineer it, right? Like figure out like, oh, I would like to be distracted from the things that are distracting me rather than, it's not about, people have been complaining about, oh, kids nowadays are, they don't work as hard as we do. And all the people complaining about it today were exactly the people that their parents and the previous generation complained about, having that same characteristic. So, that part I just don't really buy. People, if you go back thousands of years, people are always complaining about the younger generation lacks the value and work ethic of the previous generation. So that thesis doesn't really hold water for me.